This is a story. It's called Baby Bipolar Bear. When I left the hospital the first time, I realized, oh, wouldn't it be nice if there was a little story about maybe what it is to have a little bit of a bipolar bear in the house, in the family. So I'm not normally the storyteller. Pete is to our children, but this is the story, and I wrote it out tonight very quickly, but I hope you enjoy it. Once upon a time, there was a family of bipolar bears. A daddy bipolar bear, a mama bipolar bear, and a baby bipolar bear. They lived at the North Pole with many other bipolar bear families. Legend had it that the bipolar bears originally came from a place called the South Pole, but even the oldest bipolar bears could not remember ever having been to a place called the South Pole. Every family had a tale to tell about the South Pole and what life might have been like for the bipolar bears at that time. But the stories were nothing more than folklore and fairy tale passed down from generation to generation. Baby bipolar bear loved listening to his mama bipolar bear tell stories about the South Pole. He asked so many questions and loved to tell his own versions of the stories. At night, he had dreams about the South Pole and imagined what it might be like to one day meet actual South Pole bipolar bears. He asked Mama Bipolar Bear if he could travel to the South Pole one day, but she laughed, and she said it was only a fairy tale. The bipolar bears had never been anywhere but the North Pole. One day, Baby Bipolar Bear had a dream that he was a penguin. He had the same face, but was shaped like a little black and white penguin. The next morning, he came into the kitchen flapping his arms and stomping his feet. He told Mama Bipolar Bear that he wanted to fly like a penguin. Mama Bipolar Bear smiled and explained to him that penguins do not fly and that he is a baby bipolar bear, not a penguin. Baby Bipolar Bear was disappointed, but spent the entire day running around and flapping his arms, stomping his feet, pretending he could fly. The next night, Baby Bipolar Bear had a dream that he was in a very different land. There were lots of strange animals and big things that the animals lived in. In his dream, he was still a black and white bear, but he knew he was also different. He didn't know words that could explain the dream to his mama bipolar bear, but he told her that it was a place without snow. Mama bipolar bear had never heard of such a thing and reminded him that he was just her little baby bipolar bear and nothing else. Night after night, Baby Bipolar Bear dreamt that he was different kinds and colors of bears. He saw strange and amazing places and things that he could barely even understand. Every morning, he told Mama Bipolar Bear about his dreams, and sometimes felt sad when she told him that his dreams weren't real, just imagination. But in his dreams, he saw little gray bears, and he saw little brown bears, and he saw big bears and small bears, and he saw growly bears, and he saw cuddly bears. He saw all sorts of different kinds of bears that didn't look like him. He was just a baby bipolar bear. That's all he'd ever seen or known. But in his dreams, he saw all different kinds of bears of all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Mama and Daddy Bipolar Bear grew concerned and decided to visit the very wise Dr. Wise Bipolar Bear. Dr. Wise Bipolar Bear was fascinated by Baby Bipolar Bear's dreams and encouraged him to start writing and drawing stories about his dreams. That made Baby Bipolar Bear very, very happy. To this day, Baby Bipolar Bear has not left the North Pole, but tells the most amazing stories about the fascinating bears and places that he sees in his dreams. So that's my story about the baby bipolar bear. We didn't get him any medicine. We kept it simple for the story. But I was thinking, like, I just wanted to write it quickly. Like, we could have had him, like, Dr. Wise Bipolar Bear's practice could have been like near the seacoast, and maybe he has some like magazines that had drifted ashore that like maybe had other kinds of bears on the magazines, and like maybe Dr. Wise Polar Bear knew that there were other kinds of bears out there, but like he didn't let that cat out of the bag to like the rest of the people. But maybe there'd be like, you know, some sort of like adventure that baby bipolar bear would then go on to find out that he wasn't the only one of his kind, and that what he was seeing in his dreams weren't just dreams, but they were really visions of reality. Just not the one he knew, but still reality. That's the rest of the story. But that's all I got for tonight. Yeah, I like writing. I never do it. I should write more. All right. God bless you. Share it with your kids if you like that little story. Have a good night.